Breaking 26 words from King Charles just shattered a Prime Minister's future. No speech, no interview, no TV address, just one tightly crafted line that's tearing the British government apart. If you thought the monarchy was toothless in 2025, the last 72 hours will change your mind. It began with a moment no one expected. Prime Minister Keir Starmer, visibly irate, took a public swipe at King Charles. The specifics are still being argued over, but one truth stands: he crossed a line British leaders have respected for generations. He insulted the crown, and for the first time in living memory, the king chose not to let it slide. If this already sounds unreal, buckle up. Within a day, something remarkable unfolded behind Buckingham Palace's doors. Late Monday, Charles convened an emergency council not with cameras or MPS, but with his inner circle, the Lord Chamberlain, senior Privy Councillors, and constitutional scholars. The meeting stretched through the night in the dim hush of the private study. According to one aide, who insisted on anonymity, the king spoke words no one expected to hear. The Prime Minister has crossed a line no leader should cross. The monarchy must defend its dignity and its survival. That sentiment raced through Westminster like a spark on dry tinder. By Tuesday, panic had a new address: Downing Street. The king had ordered a sweeping constitutional review under a stark title, Operation Sovereign Integrity. It reportedly mapped every lawful step available to the crown if a sitting prime minister threatens the institution itself. The last time anything like this happened, a monarch gave up the throne. This time, a monarch was preparing to defend it. When 10 learned of the review, disbelief curdled into dread. One insider put it plainly: he realized he'd started a fight he couldn't win. But the palace wasn't done. Early Wednesday, sealed letters arrived at 3 desks: the leader of the opposition, the Speaker of the House of Commons, and a senior Supreme Court justice. The contents remain officially undisclosed, but palace watchers say the message was unmistakable: safeguard the constitutional balance. Not a suggestion, an unmistakable royal warning, in writing, historic, direct, unprecedented. The letters leaked. The internet detonated. #KingStrikesBack and #Defend the Crown rocketed across platforms. Overnight, the narrative flipped. It wasn't about the Prime Minister's outrage anymore. It was about a monarch asserting authority. And Britain watched, spellbound. Then the tipping point. Wednesday afternoon, the BBC cut into programming. Buckingham Palace would issue its first official line. Newsrooms froze. Phones stopped. No royal appearance, just a statement. 26 words. His Majesty remains committed to the unity and stability of the nation. He holds deep respect for Britain's democratic institutions and expects the same respect for the Crown. That was it, and it was lethal. No names, no finger-pointing. The implication was bright as daylight: disrespect the Crown and expect consequences. Commentators called it the most potent royal intervention in decades. Analysts scrambled to parse the implications. The public, largely on the king's side. Crowds swelled outside the palace. Signs read, "Stand with the Crown. Defend our king." By Thursday, police erected barriers. Church bells rang spontaneously in towns across England. Manchester, Liverpool, Birmingham, places where Republican whispers sometimes surface, saw a rare unity. This wasn't left versus right. It was respect for an institution older than any party. A taxi driver's viral street quote captured the mood. Debate policy: all you want, don't insult the king. Millions watched because millions agreed. Inside 10. Starmer watched his premiership unravel. Clarifications failed. A defensive interview backfired. The harder he tried to explain, the smaller he looked. The opposition seized the moment. Nigel Farage appeared on live TV call, measured, praising the king's restraint. Silence isn't weakness, it's strength. The king has shown strength. The studio applauded. Donations surged. Even conservative backbenchers began murmuring about a deeper reset. Behind closed doors, Starmer's own cabinet began to fracture. Deputy PM Angela Rayner reportedly stormed out of a crisis meeting, demanding a public apology. He refused. fearing it would make him look weak. Witnesses say she stared him down. "You've made yourself the enemy of the people and you're taking us with you." His face drained. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was legitimacy. And in Britain, no leader survives a battle with the crown, not in 1936, and not now. Friday's polling was brutal. One survey showed overwhelming support for the King's response. Another had a majority calling Starmer unfit to continue. Junior ministers started to quit, citing lost confidence. The Cabinet Office quietly sketched contingency plans for a caretaker government, language Britain hadn't heard in years. Neutral civil servants whispered concern. The government felt unstable. Through it all, the King said nothing. No follow-ups, no interviews. Silence became his sharpest blade. Every photo of Charles calm, courteous, composed made no 10 look more frantic. On Friday, he attended a charity event in Scotland, smiling softly, saying nothing about the crisis. Commentators dubbed it the art of invisible dominance, winning without raising your voice. Abroad, the spectacle stunned observers. US networks framed it as the most dramatic royal political clash since George III. European front pages ran with "The King speaks without speaking" and "Britain's constitutional crisis." In Canada, an official nod to respect for the monarchy read like a diplomatic side-eye. The message travelled. By the weekend, Starmer's authority was a shell. Labour MPs whispered openly about leadership challenges. Signatures for a no-confidence motion stacked up. Senior figures huddled in private to plan for life after Starmer. The machine that once protected him had ground to a halt. Then, another quiet thunderclap. Monday morning, 1 week from the first spark, King Charles summoned the Speaker and senior Privy Councillors to Windsor. No press, no cameras. Afterward, a single sentence: His Majesty has been apprised of the current situation and remains dedicated to the preservation of constitutional order. Those words are not casual. They're the kind monarchs use before acting. Reserve powers rarely used. Very real loomed into view. Was he ready to dissolve Parliament if needed? Appoint a caretaker? Either way, the subtext was clear. If government couldn't steady itself, the Crown would ensure stability. At Labour HQ, tempers flared. Veterans accused Starmer of dragging the party into an identity crisis. Leaked audio hinted at shouting. He's turned Labour into a Republican experiment and we're paying the price. Act now, or he takes us all down. And still, the King remained unflappable. While no 10 burned, the palace waited. The Crown does not shout. It endures. That quiet entrance hurt more than any speech. Britain drifted into uncharted water. Meetings were cancelled. Policy announcements delayed. Foreign partners asked careful questions about stability. Whitehall felt numb waiting for the unavoidable. Midweek, the dam cracked. Word spread that the Home Secretary and Foreign Secretary could no longer support the PM. A rumoured delegation prepared to deliver the classic ultimatum: resign or face the vote. Cameras then caught the Prime Ministerial motorcade, leaving Downing Street suddenly. The country held its breath. Was he heading to the palace? He returned an hour later. Officially, a meeting with senior advisers. Unofficially, he'd requested a private audience with the King and been refused. If true, that would be unprecedented, a symbolic withdrawal of confidence. Morning headlines hammered home the narrative. The King turns away the PM. The Crown freezes out no 10. Markets trembled. The pound dipped. But the bigger quake came from Labour ranks themselves, long-time loyalists calling for renewal and responsibility. Translation: it was over. By Thursday, the Speaker confirmed it a no-confidence motion scheduled for Monday. Outside the palace, chants merged into one: protect the Crown, restore the order. The symbolism wrote itself. That night, Starmer addressed the nation. Britain is a democracy. No one, not even the monarchy, is above accountability. Meant as defiance, it landed as desperation. Commentators called it the final misstep. Monday, 10 a.m., the House of Commons crackled with tension. The galleries were full, the air electric. When the results came, gasps rippled: 347 in favour, 283 against. The government had fallen. Within the hour, Starmer left Downing Street for the last time, resignation in hand. Cameras flashed. He said nothing. At 2 p.m. Buckingham Palace released a measured line. His Majesty the King has accepted the resignation of the Prime Minister and will, in due course, invite a Member of Parliament to form a new government in the interest of national stability. No names, no flourish, just steady authority. The final chord to a week that rewrote the unwritten rules. Outside the palace gates, cheers rose. Bells rang again across the land. Pundits branded it the week the crown reminded the nation whom it serves. In under 10 days, King Charles had shielded the monarchy's dignity and perhaps expanded its modern role. One question lingered in the air. Was this a single, extraordinary intervention or the start of a new era in which the monarch, still constitutional, becomes an active stabilizer in moments of crisis? In the first days after Starmer's exit, Britain exhaled. Crowds still stood at the palace, but the chant softened into a curious hush. People knew they'd witnessed history in real time. At Westminster, Labour convened emergency meetings to bridge the gap. Angela Rayner urged unity and restraint. Rachel Reeves, West Streeting, and others signalled support for an orderly transition. Stability first. Across the river, the palace moved with quiet purpose. Insiders described business as usual, only more focused. He's not celebrating, one aide said. He's preparing. The king consulted constitutional advisers with care. By midweek, attention turned to what came next. With Labour reeling and Conservatives regrouping, the king's invitation would shape the board. Caretaker, snap election. The palace said nothing. The silence drew the country closer. What the press began calling the royal pause. Polls showed huge approval for the king's handling, especially among younger voters. Abroad, ripples spread. In Australia and Canada, Republican debates flickered to life, but paradoxically, the crisis seemed to strengthen the monarchy's image. The crown has demonstrated relevance in a modern democracy. One columnist wrote, "Stability, tradition, restraint still powerful forces." Friday evening, Buckingham Palace confirmed what many foresaw. His Majesty had invited the leader of the opposition to form a provisional government pending a general election. It was extraordinary, entirely lawful and unlike anything the modern era had seen. Hours later, outside No. 10, the new leader addressed the nation. "We serve under the crown. We will restore trust in the institutions that make this country great." Whatever one thought of him, no one could deny the moment's weight. Britain's reaction was mixed. Some called it a necessary correction. Others warned about precedent. Scholars debated whether this was a one-off or the blueprint for future crises, a crown that remains constitutional, but decisive when the state stumbles. Through it all, King Charles remained composed. On Saturday in Cornwall, he greeted crowds, spoke of community resilience, and steered clear of politics. He didn't need to mention the week. His silence had already redrawn the map. By Sunday, the national mood turned reflective. Historians compared the week to Edward VIII's abdication, the Glorious Revolution, the birth of the constitutional monarchy. Not a coup, said Professor Harriet Linton, a correction, a moment when the crown reminded the state of its bounds and the people remembered why it exists. Questions remain. Will the balance hold? Can the monarchy resist being pulled deeper into politics after proving its quiet strength? And what will future leaders learn from the fall of a prime minister who underestimated a patient king? As dusk settled over London, the lights of Buckingham Palace glowed against the sky. Somewhere inside, Charles III reviewed papers beneath a steady lamp. He had restored the crown's dignity, perhaps even its reach, and with it, accepted a heavier weight. Because power, once exercised, is never easily set down.